Hi, everyone. I'm Thérèse, and this is New York Girl Again, The After, the podcast for caregivers who survived the hardest chapter of their lives and are now gathering both the courage and the strength to write the next one. I'm so grateful you've chosen to spend this time with me. In a recent episode, we talked about volunteering, how giving of yourself can become part of healing and refocusing after caregiving ends. I briefly mentioned boundaries then, but today we're taking a much deeper dive. Because the heart of a caregiver is different. If you are a caregiver, or you know or love one, you already know this to be true. A caregiver's heart is exceedingly empathetic. It gives without limits. It cannot stand to see anyone suffer. It sacrifices itself again and again just to bring a moment of peace or happiness to someone else. But as beautiful as that sounds, it isn't always healthy or wise. If you've ever poured yourself into someone or something until you were completely empty, this episode is for you. Because here's what I've come to learn. That pattern of overgiving doesn't begin with caregiving. Caregiving simply magnifies it. Many of us carried that instinct long before we were ever caregivers. We were the fixers, the helpers, the ones who could sense another person's needs or pain before they ever spoke a word. And somehow along the way, we learned to equate love with self-sacrifice. We learned that being good meant giving more, doing more, holding it all together, even when it hurt. But when caregiving ends, that same open heart, that same instinct to serve, can leave us vulnerable and taken advantage of, depleted, or dismissed if we don't keep it in check. And that's where boundaries come in. Boundaries are not barriers. They are lifelines. They are how we honor the heart of a caregiver without losing ourselves to it. What do you think of when you hear the word boundaries? It feels a little cold, doesn't it? Like something people build to keep others completely out. In behavioral health nursing, I've implemented boundaries countless times as part of my patients' goals and for my own physical and emotional safety. But as a caregiver for my loved ones, it's a very different story. When your role revolves around compassion, service, and sacrifice, building walls feels unnatural, even wrong. But what I've learned through experience and through a lot of self-work is that boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges. They connect who you are with what you need. Psychologically, boundaries are a form of self-regulation, a way of teaching the world how to treat you. Without them, your nervous system lives in a constant state of alert. Your body doesn't know when to rest because it's always scanning the horizon for who might need you next. Dr. Daniel Siegel, one of the world's leading experts in interpersonal neurobiology, describes something called the window of tolerance. It's that space where your mind and body feel balanced, calm, and grounded. When we're inside that window, we can think clearly, love deeply, and respond with compassion instead of reactivity. But when we're outside that window, when we're stretched too thin or overcommitted, our brains flip into survival mode. We become irritable, anxious, resentful, and eventually exhausted. Caregivers often live outside that window for years, because caregiving doesn't exactly allow for balance. You're constantly responding to crises, anticipating needs, and suppressing your own. So your brain learns that being on high alert is normal. And when caregiving ends, that hypervigilance doesn't just vanish, it lingers. That's why, in the after, you might find yourself saying yes too much, overextending, carrying everyone else's weight, or going above and beyond for someone or something else. Dr. Brené Brown says, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. That's not selfish. That's self-respect. That's self-love. That's healthy attachment. In fact, studies in positive psychology show that people with strong personal boundaries report higher levels of life satisfaction, better relationships, and lower rates of burnout. Boundaries create psychological safety, both for you and for the people around you. Because when you show up rested and regulated, you show up as your best self, not your last reserves. So boundaries aren't about choosing yourself instead of others. They're about choosing yourself as well as others. They allow you to keep giving, but in a way that's sustainable. Because if caregiving taught us anything, it's that you can't pour from an empty cup. And boundaries? They're how you finally stop letting it run dry. And yes, boundaries also protect your caregiver's heart from being taken for granted or used. But here's the eye-opener. At least it was for me. When you finally start enforcing them, some people will not like it. They may resist, disrespect, abandon, and discard you. Not because you did something wrong, but because your healing disrupts their comfort and places a limit on the endless goodness and generosity they once benefited from, without ever truly appreciating it. That's not rejection. That's revelation. It shows you who was drawn to your light and who was drawn to your availability. Why do boundaries feel so hard? If you've ever tried to set a boundary and instantly felt guilty, you're not alone. That guilt is almost universal among caregivers. Because for so long, love and responsibility were the same thing. You learned to anticipate everyone's needs, to absorb their pain, to fix what was broken before anyone asked. And when you start to draw the line, when you whisper that sacred word no, it can feel like betrayal. That's the conditioning of a caregiver's heart. During caregiving, saying yes was survival. It was love in motion. It was how you kept your loved ones safe. But after caregiving ends, that same reflex can push you to go above and beyond, pouring yourself into people or projects that don't truly value the gift of your time, heart, or energy. Psychologists call this the empathy guilt loop. It's what happens when your empathy activates before your reasoning does. Your mirror neurons fire. You feel the other person's discomfort, and your brain tells you, fix it, help them, make it better. That moment of discomfort feels unbearable, so you give in. And for a few seconds, the guilt fades, but the cycle continues. Breaking that loop doesn't mean you care less. It means you're finally learning how to care wisely. Dr. Kristen Neff, who studies self-compassion, says that healthy compassion includes boundaries, courage, and balance. Without those three, compassion becomes martyrdom. And martyrdom may look noble, but it leaves you emotionally bankrupt. I know that firsthand. When I started volunteering a couple of years after my dad died, I poured myself wholeheartedly into 2 amazing projects for a local church. And at first, it felt good. It gave me purpose again, a community to embrace and to be embraced by. But over time, I realized it was an echo of my old identity. And when I finally began to pull back, to focus on myself and my dreams, I was made keenly, and in the end, cruelly, aware that some people didn't understand. That's when I learned boundaries don't just change relationships, they reveal them. Setting a boundary means risking being misunderstood, but it also means respecting and rediscovering yourself. Because guilt is just an emotion, not a verdict. And sometimes the people who make you feel guilty for having boundaries are the very ones who benefited most from you not having any. So how do we even begin to set boundaries? How do we go from overgiving to giving through the lens of self-respect? Well, like learning a new language, it doesn't happen overnight. Setting boundaries is a process, one built on small, courageous steps. And every single step is an act of healing and of self-love. Each boundary you build strengthens the connection between who you are and how you want to live. It's not about changing overnight. It's about noticing, pausing, and choosing differently, one moment at a time. So where do we begin? It starts with awareness, with tuning into your own body and the quiet signals it's been trying to send you all along. Here are 6 steps that I have incorporated into my own life. First, start by noticing your body. Before your mind can even form the word no, your body already knows the answer. It's subtle, but it's there. That knot in your stomach when someone asks for another favor. That heaviness in your chest when you agree to something you don't really want to do. The fatigue that hits you the moment you say yes, when your whole being whispered no. Those are your body's warning lights, gentle but powerful signals that your boundary is being crossed. In caregiving, you learn to override them, to push through, to keep going, to silence your own needs. But in the after, your healing begins by listening again. So pause, breathe, listen. That's where the language of boundaries begins, not with words, but with awareness. Number 2, practice the pause. Caregivers instinctively respond instantly. We see a need, we rush in. We feel someone's discomfort, and we automatically fix it. That instinct once kept our loved ones safe, but in the after, it can keep us stuck in overgiving. The pause is that moment between impulse and action, the breath between their need and your response. When someone asks for your time, your help, your energy, don't answer right away. Take a breath, say, "Let me think about it." You don't owe anyone an immediate yes. That small pause gives your nervous system time to regulate, and your mind a moment to check in with your heart. Do I actually have the capacity for this right now? Sometimes the answer will still be yes, and that's beautiful. But when it's no, that pause is what gives you permission to honor it. Number 3, use simple, direct language. Boundaries don't need long explanations. They just need to be clear. When we start setting them, our instinct is often to over-explain, to justify, or to soften the message so no one feels uncomfortable. But honestly, clarity is kindness. When you speak your boundary clearly, you give others the gift of understanding exactly where you stand. No confusion, no guilt, no guessing. Try gentle but firm phrases like, "I can't take that on right now. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available for that." You don't have to apologize for protecting your energy. You don't have to fill the silence with reasons or excuses. A boundary isn't a debate. It's a statement of self-respect. The people meant to be in your life will honor your honesty. And those who don't, were never honoring you in the first place. So speak your truth, calmly, confidently, and without guilt. Because every time you do, you're not just drawing a line. You're reclaiming your power. Number 4, expect resistance, but hold your ground. When you start setting boundaries, not everyone will applaud. In fact, some people will push back, hard, and sometimes painfully, and in ways you would never imagine. And that's not because you're wrong. It's because your growth disrupts the dynamics they were comfortable with. For years, they may have been accustomed to your constant yes, your availability, your generosity, your willingness to go above and beyond. So when you finally draw a line, it can shake them. It may even reveal their true intentions. But remember this, their discomfort is not your responsibility. It's simply the sound of boundaries being built. Every time you stand firm, you retrain both your nervous system and your relationships. You teach people and yourself that your peace is non-negotiable. So when resistance comes, and it will, breathe through it. Stay calm, stay kind, stay consistent. Because consistency is what transforms boundaries from words into truth. And the people who truly value you will adjust. The ones who don't, they'll fall away, making room for those who will. Number 5, reframe your mindset. When you start setting boundaries, your first instinct might be to think, "I'm letting someone down." I know that is usually my first thought. But what if you reframe that thought to, "I'm showing others how to treat me and how to treat themselves." Boundaries aren't rejection. They're reflection. They reflect how deeply you value your time, your peace, and your purpose. Healthy boundaries model healthy behavior. They teach the people around you that love doesn't mean overextension, and that kindness doesn't require self-erasure. Every time you honor your own limits, you give silent permission for others to do the same. Your courage creates ripple effects, especially for other caregivers who are still learning that it's okay to say no. And if guilt creeps in, And it will. Remind yourself of this truth. You're not withholding love. You're learning how to offer it responsibly without losing yourself in the process. This mindset shift is where your healing deepens, because boundaries aren't about building distance. They're about building dignity. They are how you step into relationships with equality, mutual respect, and peace. So instead of asking, will they be upset if I say no? Start asking, what will it cost me if I say yes? That's not selfish thinking. That's self-awareness. And self-awareness, that's where self-respect begins. Lastly, number 6, anchor your boundaries in self-compassion. This is where everything comes full circle, because at the heart of every boundary is not defiance or cruelty. It's care. Dr. Kristen Neff, whose research on self-compassion has changed the way we understand emotional resilience, reminds us that true compassion must include ourselves. Without it, even the most generous heart eventually runs dry. When you set a boundary, guilt might show up first, that old voice whispering, "You're being selfish." But that voice is just fear, wearing a familiar disguise. You can meet it gently with a new truth. I'm allowed to protect my peace and my energy. Self-compassion is not self-indulgence. It's self-preservation. It's how you keep your capacity to love intact. So the next time you say no, place your hand over your heart, take a slow breath, and remind yourself, this is what love for myself sounds like. Because the more compassion you extend inward, the more grounded, joyful, and authentic your compassion for others becomes. Boundaries and self-compassion walk hand in hand. One protects, the other replenishes. Together, they allow our caregiver's heart to keep giving, but from a place of fullness, not depletion. When I look back now, I see how much of my life, especially during caregiving, was built around everyone else's needs and happiness. And I don't regret that. It was love in its purest form. But love, real love, was never meant to cost you yourself. Boundaries are how we reclaim that truth. They don't limit your heart. They liberate it. They don't make you less giving. They make your giving sustainable. Because when your peace is protected, your presence becomes more powerful. When your energy is honored, your kindness becomes more intentional. And when you learn to say no without guilt, your yes becomes powerful. There's freedom in that. The kind of freedom that lets you love without resentment, give without depletion, and rest without apology. So, if you take one thing from today's episode, let it be this. Boundaries aren't barriers. They're bridges. They connect who you are with who you're becoming. They are the gentle but firm reminder that your worth isn't measured by how much you give, but by how fully you live. You are allowed to protect your peace, and you are allowed to love yourself enough to walk away from anything or anyone that demands your self-betrayal. Because at the end of the day, boundaries aren't the end of love. They're where love finally begins, with you. If this episode spoke to your heart, share it with someone who needs the reminder that protecting their peace is an act of courage, not selfishness. You can listen to more episodes of New York Girl Again the After on your favorite podcast platform, or visit newyorkgirlagain.com to join our growing community of caregivers learning to rise in the after. Until next time, keep healing, keep honoring your heart, and keep choosing you.